What's up everyone? Blake here with yet another grow tent setup video. I have a new 10 by 5 AC Infinity grow tent that I'm going to be walking you through. This actually is replacing my previous tent that I had a grow tent setup video on my channel before. Um, we'll get into a little bit why I changed my setup again, but this video kind of touch on some of the things that I've touched on in my other videos, like the overall setup, kind of lights, humidity, watering, all that jazz. So uh, you'll see I'm actually down in my basement now. I moved my tent down here just out of the sheer need for having more space dedicated to my plants. My collection's grown quite a bit over the last year, so I really needed to find a way that I could um, have enough space for my plants today and also give them enough space to grow in the future as they grow and mature. So decided to move the tent down here into my basement, where it's actually quite a bit cooler than my upstairs. So that's been helping out on the heating and cooling side of things as well. There's also just more space down here too. So previously had a 6 foot by 6.5 foot tent, which was quickly filling up and I was running out of room in. And now I am working with a 10 foot by 5 foot tent, which gives me quite a bit more space here as well. You'll actually see too, right next door, I have my lowland tent, which I've been neglecting doing a video on, but we'll get a video of that here sometime in the future, along with my Highland chest freezer setup. But I decided to go with a tent this time versus building my own like I've done previously, just um, partly because it's easier to do. I kind of got tired of uh, building and reconstructing a grow tent from scratch each time. And so I wanted something that I could just work with out of the box. So I also was less confined by the dimensions of the space that I was in. So previously I was in a bedroom and I had a little bit more confinements in terms of the dimensions that I could use for the tent, which is why down here in the basement I have a lot more freedom, a lot more space to work with. So I wasn't as confined by the dimensions of a small bedroom. And also, I wanted to um, have a little bit more efficient use of my lights. So previously having clear walls in my tents, a lot of light escaped from that setup. So rather than being reflected throughout the tent, it was just being lost outside of the tent. So there are products out there like Panda Film and stuff where you can get some light reflection and stuff inside your tent, but I figured why not just go with something that's going to be fully reflective, floor, ceiling, and all the walls, and take advantage of all that light reflection so that I'm really maximizing the usage that I get from my grow lights. So we'll kind of take you through a tour of the tent and show you how everything is set up. But one thing I do want to point out here, just in the room itself, I have a tarp down on the floor. This is just to provide an extra layer of protection for the floors. I always like to make sure that whatever tent situation I have, I'm protecting my house first and foremost. I don't want any damage to occur because of my tent. And then the other thing that I'll briefly touch on here too is I've moved my my trash can down here that has my water reservoir. So that's I think it's a 20-gallon trash can, and that essentially just feeds my humidifier, which is in my tent. So this tent is nice. It has two doors on it. It also has these little plastic viewing windows. So some tents out there have like a mesh, which allows humidity and um, air to escape through. These are plastic, which is nice. So I don't have to worry about losing any of my conditions and can still kind of just check in on my plants. But yeah, let's open this up and get in here. Close the door behind me. All right. Some of you, if you follow me on Instagram, you might have seen some clips of this before, but this is the inside of my tent here. I'll just kind of go through everything that I've got in terms of setup. A lot of it's very familiar, so I haven't really changed too much of how I'm actually doing my lights and humidity and temperature, but I figure I'll just kind of quickly touch on that. So, uh, as previously in my videos, I've got the Florawave P80s on top. I have three of those lights now. Those are really great lights. I have them on timers. They are set on, I just bumped the light duration down from 12 hours to, or I sorry, from 14 hours, which it was previously, down to just 12 hours. Mainly because I'm starting to, well, for a while now, I've been getting some redness on the leaves here, so I wanted to try and minimize that. And let's see, this one is lobster red there. The lights are as high up as they can go, so I can't really change or decrease the distance. So the next thing that I can try is to decrease the photo period. So I've dropped it down 2 hours. Hopefully that will take care of some of the redness without sacrificing some of the nice coloration, and as well as like this leaf to pitcher ratio that I have on a lot of my plants, which I really enjoy. If that doesn't work, one thing I might try doing is actually adding a layer of shade cloth under here to kind of cut down the light intensity. Although that's not my first choice because with LEDs, there's a cost associated with running these lights. And so if I'm deliberately removing some of the intensity of the lights, I feel like that's a little bit wasteful in terms of, the lights are still operating at full strength, but I'm not utilizing that full strength. So I'd like to try to solve some of the redness through other means. Underneath the shelves, I still have these Barrina T5 LEDs. So on some of my smaller plant shelves, like this is my smalls and extra smalls, and then down below is kind of more of my medium-sized plants. I have four Barrina T5 LEDs. These have been working great, but again, like I've mentioned before, you have to kind of keep a relatively short distance above these plants in order for these lights to be close enough to give the plants the level of light that they need to adequately pitcher. So you kind of lose out on some of the benefits of having room for your plants to grow up, but that kind of works for some of these smaller plants, whereas other plants, Vici is not a good example because it doesn't really grow up, but these plants over here, it's kind of the same situation. I wanted them on the top shelf to kind of give them a bit more room to grow up. Speaking of the shelf over here, these are some new lights. So these two lights are also Barrina LEDs, but you'll notice they don't have a diffuser on them. These are clear. They're also a little bit more high powered. So I am only running two of these LEDs under this, and I get about, so just with these two LEDs at this distance here, which is about 2 feet from the light to the tops of the plants, I get about the same level of light intensity as I get with four of these Barrina LEDs at this distance, which is about a foot. So I'm a huge fan of these Barrina T5 LEDs without the diffuser on them. And I'll put a link in the description of this video to all the products I'm using, but these have been awesome, especially since I have to use fewer lights. That's a win-win for me. So let's maybe talk a little bit about the temperature, humidity, and fans and stuff, anything having to do with like the environmental controls here. So you'll notice right here I've got a fan wired up or hooked up here. This fan is this is an AC Infinity inline duct booster. So this is not the typical fans that you'll see in grow tents. This is actually meant more for like a HVAC situation. So it's a little dangerous because I shouldn't stick my fingers in there because it is plugged in, but there's no protection there. So you have to be careful to put it in a place where, you know, someone's not going to stick their fingers in it like I just did stupidly. But essentially what this is doing is it's hooked up to some duct venting, and that venting just, the line just runs straight down outside of my grow tent. And what it's doing is it's hooked up to this Inkbird temperature controller, which is set right now at 75 degrees. So anytime it goes above 75, this fan kicks on and it pulls in cooler air from outside the tent. So right now it's 75. In my basement living room, it's typically during the days around 65, 70 degrees or so. So it's a little bit cooler out in the living room. And so just by pulling in fresh air from outside, I'm able to kind of keep the tent at a nice and comfortable 75 degrees during the day. And then at night, the thermostat in my house is set to go down to 64 on my main level, but because there's a temperature difference between my main level and the basement, which the basement typically stays cooler in the evening, it gets around 60 degrees in here or so at night just by pulling in air from outside the tent. So pretty good highland conditions right now, which we're in winter right now in Minnesota. So that will obviously change during the summer when we switch from heating to cooling. So during the summer, what I'm going to have to do is actually run that exhaust vent out to the window, which is adjacent to the tent here. And I will hook a portable air conditioner unit and just kind of have that situated on the floor in here and have that vented outside the tent. So the setup will change a little bit during summertime, but right now this is working just fine for the winter. So good highland conditions during the winter, 75-degree days, 60 degrees at night, sometimes maybe into like the high 50s, depending on how cool it is in here. And then in the corner there, you will see this is an AC Infinity Oscillating Fan. So this product is really cool. AC Infinity designed this to connect specifically to grow tent poles. So this clamp is designed to connect to that pole and provide enough space for the fan to oscillate. There's the speed controllers on the back, but the other thing that's really nice about this fan is it's waterproof rated. I can't remember if it's waterproof or water resistant, but essentially the fan is sealed so that humidity and moisture can't get into the electronics of the fan. And that's good in a grow tent situation because obviously run a humidifier in here, things are very humid, there's moisture floating around everywhere, and the last thing that you need is for that moisture to get into your electronics of things and short the circuit of whatever is in there, either effectively damaging that or rendering it inoperable, or in a worst case situation, starting an electrical fire. So for me, it was worthwhile to invest in these AC Infinity fans so that I can have some longevity as well as some peace of mind that my fans aren't going to stop working one day or, worst case scenario, start an electrical fire. Definitely don't need that. So I have two of them here, one in this corner and one in the opposite corner, and then down below I have this Vornado fan, which I had in my previous tent as well, just to kind of keep air circulating from the ground. So the idea is to make sure that air is moving throughout the tent. Cool air isn't just stuck on the bottom and hot air isn't just stuck on the top. So the fan on the bottom of the tent helps, it's angled up into the corner so it can kind of keep air circulating and moving throughout the tent, as well as fresh air coming in from outside the tent. I also have these vents open on my grow tent on both sides. So these are just there to kind of passively cool the tent. The idea being that there's no fans in them actively pulling air out, but any heat or hot air that rises in the tent will kind of gradually seep out through the tent. So that also kind of plays a role in keeping the tent cool. Uh, I also have these AC Infinity fans, these USB fans wired up for each of the shelves just to ensure that adequate airflow is going throughout each of the shelves. So airflow is really important in a grow tent situation where it's very easy for air to become stagnant and then you run into mold and fungal issues and all kinds of nasty things. So the fans are set to be on all the time except for the exhaust fan, which again is hooked up to my temperature controller. And right next to the temperature controller, this is the humidity controller, also Inkbird. So I have it set to 75% relative humidity. You can see right now in here it's 85, so the humidifier is not running, but once that humidity drops below 75%, then this Hydrofogger, this is specifically the Minifogger, this will kick on and provide some humidity into the tent. And then it'll shut off, I think, once it reaches 80%. So you can set the thresholds on the Inkbird humidity controller. You can determine like what's your set value and then how far below that set value do you want it to drop before the humidifier kicks on. And then as it's raising the humidity, how high do you want it to be before the humidifier shuts off. So I have it set to turn on at the set value is at 75. Once it drops below 70, then the humidifier will kick on, raise the humidity to 80. So it's on average keeping the humidity at about 75%. All right, that is temperature, humidity, fans, ventilation, lighting. Let's see what else can we cover in here. You'll see I have same 4-foot by 18-inch deep wire shelving units that I had in my last setup. Those are all the same. So I've got my VCI in one shelf, and then extra small and small plants on the other, and then medium size, large size plants on this shelf. Opposite to that, I have kind of my extra large plants on the top shelf just to give them the most amount of vertical space to grow. And then I have kind of my large size and some extra large size plants on this bottom shelf here. One addition I did make is I added a space to grow plants, taking advantage of as much vertical space as possible. So remember, Nepenthes are vining plants. They need room to grow up, especially if you want to grow your plants up until flowering. So on this shelf, I have all of the plants that I would like to allow to vine and grow up and potentially flower. So I have them just down on the ground here, and this light is suspended about 4 feet above the tops of the plants. So they're still getting adequate light levels down here, but they're also getting the benefit of having all of this extra vertical space. So I've got some plants in here, like this is Nepenthes Dormouse, which is a dubia hybrid. I've got jamban. I've got, some of the vining plants, or some of the more vining toilet bowl Sumatran species like that. And so I also have some Varia rhododendrons in here, which these are some new seedlings that I got this past fall. So I've got a couple of those that I'd like to grow up. The Varias are supposed to get up between 3 and 5 feet tall as well. So once those are fully grown, they will be pretty large here. So right now I am up to 6 trays. So I'm still using the self-watering trays. I've got 6 of them now, taking advantage of every single inch of space here in this tent. So I know I've talked a little bit about the self-watering trays in other videos, but essentially these are just felt wicking mats that wick water up from the trays here. This serves as like a water reservoir, and it wicks water up to the mat, and the mat wicks water into the substrate. Plenty more videos on my channel if you want more information about that. Um, one other thing I'll mention here, I've got my, this is my temperature sensor. I have my humidity sensor down there. This is the temperature sensor as well as my Sensorpush temperature and humidity sensor. I wanted to have them located in a position that is going to provide me a good reading, so I kind of have them suspended from the middle of my tent. So the Sensorpush temperature and humidity sensor, that gives me data in the Sensorpush app, which I can check on my phone. Super convenient. And then of course this temperature probe is what the temperature sensor down there is using to determine when to turn the fan on, which it just turned on. One other thing I'm going to mention too is I'm also starting to have some, or find some spots for hanging plants in this tent. So I'm constantly short on room, and I want to make sure I give my plants enough adequate space to grow fully and mature. And so I'm trying to take advantage of as much vertical space as possible. So I have a couple of plants in hanging baskets. This I have, this is one of those Barrina T5 LEDs like I have down there. This is the one without the diffuser on it, so you can see the LEDs pretty clearly right on there. And so I still need to get my hands on an extension cord, but essentially I'm just gonna hook this up to an extension cord and have this plugged in so that these plants can have some light as well, because while they're receiving light from the rest of the tent, it's still kind of a darker spot over here. This is also where I have some of my vanilla plants as well vining up, and eventually I want them to kind of grow and spread out across all of these tent poles. So the roof of this tent is covered in vines, which I think would be nice. So I think that is about it. I will probably do another video update tour going through all of the plants that you see here, which, you know, some of them are looking really good right now. Some of them repotted recently and aren't necessarily looking at their best, but there's definitely some updates to go through, some new plants and things like that. So thanks again for watching. Check out the links in my description of this video for links to any of the products and stuff that I'm using here, and thanks for watching.